What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Offsetting Penalties Podcast. It is 9:30 p.m. Pacific time, past midnight on the East Coast. Super Bowl 60 just wrapped up. The new kings of the hill, the new kings of the NFL. It's not Philly. It's not KC like we've seen a bunch of times. It's the Seattle Seahawks. Really a complete beatdown and dismantling of the New England Patriots. And the Seahawks are the new kings of the NFL, Zach.
They are. They are indeed. And I got to give so much credit to Seattle. I got to give way more credit to that defense and more credit to everything about just Mike McDonald's plan. But that defense is generational. Okay? That
Generational.
defense is generational.
Generational is the correct word. I felt like I spent so much time on this podcast talking about how good Houston's defense is and Denver's is and even New England throughout these playoffs. And I thought New England's defense played a really good game tonight. But it was clear that Seattle, the number one scoring defense in the league, they were the number one scoring defense their only other time they won the Super Bowl 11 years ago. And in that game, they dismantled the Broncos. And in this game, it was a little bit of a slower dismantling, but it happened nonetheless. The Seattle Seahawks win 29-13 in Santa Clara. They opened up the year against the 49ers, losing to the 49ers. So quite the poetic ending for Seattle to go win a Super Bowl at their stadium in Santa Clara in the Bay Area. It was a complete one-sided affair. I think we'll go through all the storylines, but I think, like you mentioned at the top, I think the story from this game is Seattle's defense. New England only had 13 points. 6 of those came in complete garbage time, and the other 7 came from just 2 basically desperation heaves to Mac Hollins. Besides that, they were just completely making Drake May see ghosts, which is kind of ironic considering Sam Darnold was the quarterback who infamously was seeing ghosts early in his career. It was Drake May who saw him tonight because of just an unbelievably elite Seattle defense.
No, you know what? Exactly. Seeing ghosts. But I can't blame a second-year player who's been playing great, right? I think, to be honest, what I saw tonight is, and I know it's probably like, wow, Zach, everybody saw it too, man. I think what we kind of missed off the boat, obviously we know this, but the left tackle position for the New England Patriots is the weakest link in this whole entire offensive line. That whole left side's horrible. No doubts, no shots at Will Campbell. I know he's a rookie. He's getting under his feet, but to be honest, they looked like the worst offensive line in football tonight.
Yeah.
Like the Raiders and them can compete. I mean, I'm gonna say New England has a better offensive line majority of the time in that idea, but nothing separated from those two teams tonight off of offensive protection. I mean, he got sacked 6 times, and it was horrible to see that if you can't protect your quarterback, if you can't even get the run game going, which we thought at first it looked pretty good when Ramondre Stevenson was starting to get some momentum first off, and then they started giving these dink and dunks in garbage time to Travion Henderson. But again, what they should have done was they should have kept running the ball, and they needed to go play action. Drake May with play action and giving him bootlegs would have been way better for him to avoid this blitz and to open it up for him, because when he was dropping back, majority of the time he felt pressure and it was rushing his cadence, it was rushing his footwork, and then his reads were there, but then there were some coverages where he ended up just saying, hey, I'm just going to take a shot and just hope something's going to happen. The best zone receiver, one of the best zone receivers in our generation, Stephon Diggs. The way he breaks down zone defenses. And the fact is that I don't even know how many catches he got tonight. Not enough to nearly that he should have made an impact, because like Chris Collinsworth said, if you would have told me that Stephon Diggs was going to be a minimum contributor in the Super Bowl, I would have thought you're crazy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, his doing my little bit of betting intel prior to the game, he had one of the higher reception over-unders of the entire game. And, Stephon Diggs was a guy who this year, the snap counts haven't been crazy. And I think a lot of it was veteran receiver coming off of an ACL last year. In the playoffs, those kind of tended to spike. Tonight, he was not heard from. And you know what? As great as Stephon Diggs has been throughout his career, and he showed flashes of it this year, I think if 2026 Stephon Diggs is your best weapon or best pass catcher, at least on an offense, I think it's hard to match up with a Seattle defense like this. If we're just talking straight Jimmys and Joes, there are all pro caliber players on every single level of that Seattle defense. And tonight, it felt like, yeah, Drake May did not play a good game at all. There were a lot of decisions. That interception that Drake May threw, I don't know what the hell he was looking at. That was one of the worst interceptions I've seen in a Super Bowl, let alone a football game, in a long, long time. But let's not get it twisted. It didn't feel like that was how it was going to go off rip. Off rip, they started running the ball a little bit. Ramondre, Travion Henderson got involved early, and it really felt like this is how you break down a defense with two high safeties, is you really run the ball. But what kept happening? First down, that they try their hand with a drop back pass, get sacked. Or they try their hand with a screen pass, -4 yards. And it just felt like what would happen is anytime New England got a little bit of momentum, the Seattle defense would create a negative play. And that's where you'd love to have some alpha, really, really elite wide receiver step up for you and be able to separate, be able to make a great catch for you. Kayshon Boutte, there was a slant route for a first down, and Drake May should not have thrown it with the juice that he did. But that's still a catch you want your receiver making, and maybe if there's a better, more sure-handed receiver than a Kayshon Boutte or a Stephon Diggs in that situation, maybe that ball is caught. It just felt like a complete demolition. It just felt like this New England offense never stood a chance if they weren't going to run the ball, and it became very apparent early that as much as they wanted to run the ball, you got to be able to pass it every once in a while, and they just, until it became garbage time, could not create one positive passing play.
No, 100%. And both of these defense came to play. Okay, I do want to add the note too. I want to say it before I lose my thought. When you have a receiver leading the team like Mac Hollins was the whole night for New England, then you know exactly what the type of play style they were going for towards the end. They played very conservative before because they didn't want to turn it. Both teams did. Okay, at first, both of them did because both the defenses came out to play. New England at first with their defense, they looked absolutely like they were going to demolish the crew. They were going to make it known to everybody like, hey, you guys didn't believe that we could be a top defense. I mean, they were playing lights out until later, towards the later half of the Super Bowl. But at the end of the day, who I want to give so much flowers to is Christian Gonzalez. Christian Gonzalez played absolutely lights out. Absolutely lights out. He was one of the main focal points, the reason why they were still majority in the game all the way to the first half, going in midway of the third quarter. And yeah, he played absolutely lights out. And I think what they're missing for sure is they're going to have to do some adjustments on the O-line next year, and they need a receiver. This just showed everybody why they need somebody for a weapon for Drake May.
For sure. I mean, this was obviously current day Brandon Ayuk. You don't want to mess with that. But before the whole ACL and speeding in front of Levi Stadium, Brandon Ayuk, this was a team, the Patriots were almost, if it weren't for Ayuk basically vetoing it, he would have gone there and gone in a bigger contract than he ended up getting from the Niners. This has been a team that has been seeking a true number one receiver for a couple of years now. And it felt like Stephon Diggs was like their best chance at one, kind of the best option. And I think Stephon Diggs this year certainly proved that he's in no means washed or anything, but I just think you're right. You need an alpha receiver, especially when you've got a young quarterback like Drake May. Think about all the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. They've always had an elite pass catcher by their side, whether it's Mahomes with Kelsey, Josh Allen with Diggs earlier in his career, Joe Burrow with Chase and Higgins, right? And it feels like this, if you want Drake May to have success long term, you need to get him a go-to target. And likewise, you got to get this O-line figured out. Will Campbell was the number 4 overall pick in the draft, and a big knock on him was he was a little undersized and he had a little short arms for a tackle. Many people wanted him to kick inside and to be a guard because they felt the shorter arms and the shorter build wouldn't cater to a tackle, because what happens is those shorter tackles, those shorter arm offensive tackles end up getting bull rushed a lot. And from the rip, the first drive of the game, he was getting bull rushed, and he's been getting bull rushed the entire playoffs. Not to mention his left guard right next to him, Jarrett Wilson, is another rookie, was their second or third round pick this year. And I think if you're New England, you want to trust in the guys that you did your evaluation process last offseason and you spent high draft capital on. But if Will Campbell looks like how he did down the stretch next year, you've got a serious problem. And I think it wasn't just Will Campbell. It was Morgan Moses on the other side. It was Jared Wilson inside. It was Garrett Bradbury. It felt like the whole O-line was just getting beat. And look, you can chalk that up to how dominant Seattle's defensive line is. But at the end of the day, New England just went to a Super Bowl. The expectation next season and on is going to be winning Super Bowls. And if you're going to win Super Bowls, you got to be able to handle these elite defenses. And I think against Houston and against Denver, the offense did just enough to survive those. Against Seattle, it was not just enough at all.
No, 100%. I'm glad that you said that. We got a comment in the Instagram live from Drill. He says, my grandma could have beat Campbell off the edge. Oh, absolutely, probably. Yeah, I think the idea off of this, the whole New England Patriots bus was left, or the offensive linemen were left on that bus. They were left a lot. They were shell shocked. But you know what? That even happened in the Denver Broncos game. That even happened in the Texans game. There was still majority high sacks of Drake May all in the playoffs, okay? But you know what I want to switch off of this? Because, yes, I'm going to give New England what they did or what they didn't do. You know, my variable, you're still coach of the year, 100%. I'm not going to give that away from you now. What I'm going to say, let's flip the script off of this. Okay, there's one player. Obviously, Kenneth Walker is the biggest storyline in this Super Bowl, I believe. A straight dog, and I want you to start off of there. But I want to say this first is Sam Darnold. Okay, what he has done in these playoffs, it doesn't have to be flashy, it doesn't have to be these things because he's heated up. Obviously today, you know, he didn't play the greatest offensive performance, but what he did do was he didn't turn over the football. And he didn't turn over the football all playoffs. And that's the one thing about this guy that was one of the most turnover heavy quarterbacks, still pretty high interceptions this season, but he came in the postseason locked and loaded, and he's in a Super Bowl stage. And I want to put that out there because it needs to be known. But that's what I want to say. But, you know, Joe, off of what Seattle, I definitely want to talk about Kenneth Walker. But if you want to add more about what Sam was doing, I think it was, I know you don't like Seattle. I know it for a fact. But I think they brought it tonight.
Yeah, Sam Darnold, I would like to talk about Sam Darnold a little bit. I think for him to go all playoffs without a turnover is incredible, considering that was the issue. That was the glaring red flag the entire season. But I watched this game tonight. I couldn't help but think to myself, Sam Darnold isn't playing an exceptional game. Like, it felt like to me early in this game that what Sam Darnold did and what Drake May didn't was Sam Darnold so narrowly avoided the big negative plays that Drake May couldn't. And I think there was a couple instances, especially early in the game, where New England was sending the dogs, and Sam Darnold looked dead to rights. He breaks the sack. And maybe it was just him throwing it away, him canning it, or him getting, tackled out of bounds for a 1 or 2 yard gain. But, the difference in Super Bowl games like this with two elite defenses is taking those sacks, and the difference between a 2nd and 18 versus a 2nd and 10 or a 2nd and 8 is huge, right? So I think he avoided those. I also think the other thing, you talked about it, Christian Gonzalez, unreal. That dude is elite of a corner as there is in the NFL. He had his hands on one that very well should have been picked before half. And there were a couple balls that Sam Darnold threw in the first half specifically that should have been interceptions. There was a couple of those. When Seattle got their hands on the ball, they got the ball back. They got the turnovers, whether it was the strip sack fumbles on Drake May or it was the interception late in the second half. Sam Darnold, there were a couple that should have been. Now, there were a couple throws. That throw to Kupp on the opening drive was just an absolute bullet and was unbelievable. And a lot of people thought, oh, maybe that should have been picked. No, I think that was just as perfect as a throw as possible over Marcus Jones. But I think the difference in this game, it wasn't Sam Darnold, like you said, wasn't anything flashy, because there was some flash in those first two playoff games, especially against the Rams. There was no flash in this one. It was he avoided the basically drive-ending negative plays that Drake May couldn't.
No, exactly. And the idea is, football is won off a game of inches. Obviously, tonight it was the battle of the trenches, but it was also the defensive schematic where the NFL is all about defensive now. I really believe that. It's really like, how are these defenses going to make it for a nightmare of these offenses? And that's what I feel like this is the seed that's planted tonight that's really showing why these defensive coaches, like you talked about a while back in our podcast, it's always been about the offensive play callers, what they're doing and how they're able to dissect it. Now it's about the defense. It's about how hungry these defensive schematic players can do that. Mike McDonald just showed it. But I think what really fascinated me was that we have both defensive players. Obviously, we have for Christian Gonzalez. I honestly believe for the Patriots, he might be probably the best corner coming into next year. Obviously, Patrick Surtain's great, but what I saw
Yeah,
tonight from him, he's making a statement, okay?
for sure.
But now for Seattle, they build and they keep this core defense. It's going to be a nightmare. And the idea, this defensive line, what they were able to do from everywhere, there was really no mistakes from this team at all. Okay,
Yeah,
and that's what's the biggest thing. But the biggest headline here is Kenneth Walker.
for
And the
sure.
way what I
Has to be.
saw from him, he was disgusting. And I want you to break him down a little bit because there's something that I want to add later on as well.
Yeah, Chris Collinsworth said it on the broadcast. There was a little shades of Le'Veon Bell, the patient running behind the line of scrimmage, the kind of almost coming to a dead stop before finding the hole. I think Kenneth Walker, coming out of college, coming out of Michigan State, and really his entire career, the athletic traits have been unbelievable. The dude is such a fast twitch athlete. He's got such explosiveness, especially when you get him out on the edge. And I think that was a big point of emphasis for Seattle tonight was you're facing the number one run defense in the entire league in New England. If you're going to run on this team, you want to cater to your running back skill set. Running between the tackles, Kenneth Walker's good at. He showed flashes of it tonight, but against an elite defense like this, you want to get him on the edge. You want to let him use his explosiveness, and that's what they did. I just thought it was a phenomenal performance, and really, ever since Charbonnet went down in that divisional round game, it's really felt like Kenneth Walker as the workhorse has shown like this is what I'm capable of if you give me a full workload. He's never had that in the NFL. His entire time in the NFL, it's felt like he's had another running back. Most of the time, Charbonnet kind of splitting the snaps with him, and he's such a good back. He's a really good pass catcher. He does tend to have those -4, -5 yard plays where he's trying to make something out of nothing, and that's something that probably needs to be addressed long term. But he's such an unbelievable player, and really the crazy thing about Kenneth Walker is he just won Super Bowl MVP, and he's a Super Bowl MVP going into free agency. He is an unrestricted free agent now. I don't know how Seattle lets him out of the building after what he just did in this playoff run, but just an unbelievable performance. I don't think this was just the Kenneth Walker game. I think this is the Kenneth Walker playoffs.
100%, dude. It's K9, and we're just living in this world. And there's a reference off of like Atlas. If you ever see the guy that holds the globe and holds the workload, he was holding Seattle. He was
Yeah.
holding the 12s. He was holding the whole NFL on the palm of his shoulders this whole postseason. And it was multiple games. It wasn't just one over 100 yards rushing, okay? And obviously, sadly, he didn't get a rushing touchdown today. He almost did if that hold from his center didn't go through. But this man just showed us why he can easily be a top running back in this league now if they give him this ability. He's a freak of nature. Now, the one thing I want him to work on in the season, and I'm like, what? He's a Super Bowl MVP. What do you want, Zach? You don't even play in the NFL. No. I want him to work on his receiving. If he becomes a receiving back too, and both ways, and keep it with Zach Charbonnet, because when you have both of these 1-2 punches, it'll be disgusting. But when he's adding another layer to his game, there's no question why Kenneth Walker can't keep doing what he's doing schematically and building to a big season. I mean, what I like, I've never seen a running back with so much patience, Joe. I've never seen a guy that can skip in the line, just walk, wait, and then just burst. And the way he was doing it, he was making every defensive player that he touched tonight, silly. Made him look absolutely stupid. And when you can do that and slow down football, that becomes when you master a craft. And he's still young. He's still young in this league, and I think he's going to grow. I really think so.
Yeah, I think Kenneth Walker, the Le'Veon Bell-esque patience. I think the athleticism. I think you're right, and you know what? The receiving. Maybe he needs to improve the receiving. Maybe not. It's something that we've never really seen him have the opportunity to do. Because as long as he's been in Seattle, he hasn't had the opportunity to be the third down back. It's always been Charbonnet, and now that Charbonnet's gone down, George Halani has been the third down back for them. So maybe it's something in his arsenal. Maybe it's not. I think part of being a third down back in the NFL as well as pass protection, obviously. And, I can't sit here with full confidence and tell you whether Kenneth Walker is good in pass pro or not. But what you saw tonight, he bought himself these playoffs and a very good contract for a running back. And, I don't see how Seattle lets him out of the building after that. And I also want to give some love to the Seattle Seahawks offensive line. The offensive line was a massive issue for them a couple of years ago. The front office has really made an emphasis to spend high draft capital on it. Charles Cross was a high pick. He's become their cornerstone tackle. This year they drafted Gray Zabel, who was a guy many people did not think, why are you taking this guy out of North Dakota State in, the mid to late first round? It was like, this was a guy projected to be a second or third rounder. And he goes to Seattle, and he's been an absolute dominator in the trenches, specifically in the run game. I think this Seattle team, I talked about it on our pod after the NFC Championship. I just think this front office, they've made every single correct move. They've built this team the best way you can, which is they've drafted homegrown talent between the guys on the O-line like Charles Cross and Gray Zabel to the weapons like Kenneth Walker and JSN. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball. Nick Eamon is a rookie. Devin Witherspoon was a guy they spent very high draft capital on. He had 2 sacks tonight as a cornerback. Yeah. He had 2 sacks, and he was and it wasn't just like free blitzes. Like he was like eluding offensive linemen on his way there. Like unbelievably talented. They've spent draft capital on guys up on the D line. It just feels like this is such a well-rounded team. And I want to bring it to this. You talked about it a little bit. We've seen this over the past 10 years, this like evolution of you need the offensive guru as the head coach, the Shanahans, the McVays of the world, the LaFleurs of the world, the Andy Reids of the world. Obviously, it's worked. And now this year, and I would argue last year too, even though Vic Fangio wasn't the head coach for Philly, I think he was probably the most influential coach on that Philly coaching staff last year. And now this year you've got Mike Macdonald, who has just made really good offenses look silly the entire season. I think there's a chance we see a gravitation towards, okay, all these good offensive gurus are coaching these teams. Maybe instead of following the herd and trying to get offensive gurus, maybe we try to get the offensive guru stoppers. And I think that Mike Macdonald is the first guy to do that. And I think we'll see many following his way, like Jesse Minter, like others.
100%. I think defense is going to be starting to implode to this whole deal for the National Football League. And we're here for it. I mean, people said it was a snooze fest, but at the end of the day, maybe it is, maybe it was. I think the most important thing people have to realize is that when we say defense wins championships, defense do win championships. They would not be where they were tonight without that defense. They would not be that without their whole entire season. And even Kyle Shanahan said too, it's like when he talked about in the pregame, it's like understanding to understand. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my words because I was so mesmerized. These 2 safeties, it didn't matter what they were doing. They brought a 4-man box, brought a 5-man box, brought a 6-man box, and they were just wreaking havoc. They made Drake May look silly at some points. I'm not going to take shots at him because he's young. But they also minimized Josh McDaniels, who knows the game of football.
Yeah.
And they minimized him.
Yeah.
They minimized him very, very much so. And that's not just off of what he had because his players have to be there and run his schematics, but they minimized him tonight. What I want to say off the drawing board, where I want to go next, is for Seattle, how they recreate this, where they go. I think you got to keep that main core, but now Clint Kubiak's going to leave.
Yeah.
Okay,
Vegas.
This offensive coordinator is so big, and just same thing with the Lions. I'm not saying it's the same scenario, but when Ben Johnson left, that offense did not look the same for passing wise schematically. Okay, no. And I want to see how Seattle transitions with a new play caller, who they get, who they promote, because that's where this team needs to go to the next step. How do you get back into these playoffs? Because they will definitely be a playoff team. I 100% agree they will be a playoff team. But I don't know if they get back to the success.
Yeah, it's a hard thing in the NFL. I think we've seen the Chiefs dynasty, right, in the past. If you want to call it a dynasty or not, they've been to a gazillion Super Bowls in the last 10 years. And part of the formula for success with them is you've got your head coach, Andy Reid, but Steve Spagnuolo, their coordinator, their defensive coordinator, is a guy who we've seen be a head coach before. It hasn't worked out. No one really wants to hire him as a head coach, so he's just staying with Kansas City, and it's worked out great for them. When you're the new kids on the block, this new dominant team, coordinators are going to get stolen left and right, right? It happens with
Yep.
it happens with the Los Angeles Rams, it happens with the San Francisco 49ers, it happens
Yep.
with all the great teams in the NFL. It happened with the Baltimore Ravens. That's why Mike McDonald is the head coach for the Seattle Seahawks now. And it's very interesting. Last year, Ryan Grubb, who was the offensive coordinator for the University of Washington, he becomes offensive
Mhm.
coordinator for Seattle. And the offense last year for Seattle statistically wasn't bad at all. And their defense was almost as dominant as it was this year. Their defense was elite last year as much as it was this year. But it didn't work out. And the reason is you can have two good play callers or two good coordinators. And in the Seahawks case, Mike McDonald's basically the defensive coordinator. But there's got to be a marriage between the two in terms of play style, right? What's made Clint Kubiak so good is he commits to running the ball, and that plays into the Seahawks' hand in which they like having a physical defense. Those play hand in hand. You can hire the right offensive coordinator who puts together a good offense, but is it an offense that's going to be able to marry well with this defense? Because the reality is, sadly for the rest of the NFL, is most of the Seattle roster is under contract for next year. Like that, most of their core quarterback, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is going to be here next year. And obviously, the entire NFL is going to be watching film on the Seahawks. They're the top of the mountain now. They're the people you have to dethrone. But it's always interesting to see when you see these Super Bowl teams who lose coordinators. Yeah, how do you recover? Obviously, in the next probably week or so, me and you will talk. We'll probably know who the offensive coordinator is for Seattle, and we can get into that more then. But I really just think that as long as they get an offensive play caller who marries the style of this defense, they're going to be fine. Because what we saw tonight was utter domination, and they made a second-year quarterback who was one vote away from winning the MVP award. He didn't even look remotely close to an MVP candidate tonight. It looked
No.
bad, and part of you wants to say this isn't on Drake May. Obviously, he's young. He didn't get much help from his offensive line and stuff, but I think this defense rattled him early, and they sped up his timing the entire night. Even the times that Seattle wasn't getting pass rush on him, he was getting rid of the ball unnecessarily fast because of just the havoc they wreaked earlier in the game, speeding up his clock. I think that regardless of whatever offensive coordinator Seattle brings in, as long as they have this defensive core and this guy calling the plays on defense and Mike McDonald, they're going to be a scary, scary out for any NFL team that sees them on their schedule.
My last couple notes, and I'm glad you said this because I have nothing more to say about Seattle. Seattle's already done so much great. Maybe there's one tidbit I want to wrap up off Seattle, and then I want to leave with the Patriots improvement. I
Yeah.
think the biggest part is if you told me JSN wasn't going to be the biggest factor, right? Which,
Yeah.
hey, it happens. Defense finally kind of minimized him. He did get out of the game for a little bit with the head injury. Glad that he didn't. He was able to come back. Cooper Kupp, okay, we kind of slept on him for a lot of things. I slept on him for sure
Yeah.
because of his age, because of where he is. But you know what? He did provide a lot of reliability. He was their top target receiver tonight, and he did help them convert some crucial plays. And he brought his veteran presence. And the idea for him to do that, I want to give him so much respect. He earned his Super Bowl victory tonight. I know it wasn't the most flashiest, but he was great. AJ Barner was great too, I think, at times as well, the tight end for
Yeah, for
Seattle in
sure.
the passing game.
For sure.
But again, that running game, that defense won the game. If we could have just set an award, I know they have to give it to Kenneth Walker. He was great, but that defense, I mean, that
Yeah,
whole entire defense,
for sure.
yeah, that whole entire defense,
For sure. I
yeah,
mean, they were as that's as dominant, and we've actually seen Seattle themselves 11 years ago against Denver have an
yep,
unbelievably dominant defensive performance. We saw the Patriots versus the Rams, 2018,
yep,
2019. That was a dominant
hmm
defensive performance. This one to me felt a little bit different because New England had their yards and stuff, but it just felt like every time New England got like an ounce of momentum and you'd hear Collinsworth go, oh, here we go. It was like Seattle would throw a knockout punch. And it was this just like hit on Drake May, force a fumble, or the interception or whatever. It just felt like a defense that just refused to quit. And to me, we live in the moment, so I don't want to like overreact. And you can comment on this. To me, I think this was the greatest defensive performance I can recall from a defense in a Super Bowl in the last decade. Phillies was great. Seattle's first one against Denver was great. New England's against LA was great. But this one, to me, just the physicality, it felt different.
yeah. And people were trying to say like the Bucks. Oh, you remember the Bucks? I'm like, yeah, I remember the Bucks, but they're not the Seahawks. They're
No.
not. They're not almost 11 players running to the ball on the defensive side. Every single time I saw somebody in the defensive side run to the ball, go punch it out, hit them. Their special teams literally smacked all their returners, smacked Marcus Jones, smacked
Yeah.
Kyle Williams, absolutely dominated every single facet. Jason Myers had probably one of the best kicking performances in Super Bowl, just being automatic and scoring the most points now in NFL history. I think that's big in itself for postseason, and that's big what they've done. If anything you want to add on that, because I'm ready to go with New England.
No,
About them.
talk to me about New England, because this is a team that I've talked a little bit on this podcast. I said it to you when the Bears lost. Right, the future is bright. You've got a second-year quarterback. You've got a first-year head coach. You've got this was a roster with a ton of free agent signings and rookies. It was kind of unheard of for a team with this many new guys on the team to go to a Super Bowl. So a lot of these guys are going to be under contract on this team next year. But in the NFL, it's no given that you can just get right back there just because the future is bright. Injuries happen, teams improve. Buffalo, the team that they, took the AFC East from, hired a new head coach. They promoted Joe Brady. You'd imagine other teams in the AFC are going to get better. So where do you go if you're New England? Like, what's the emphasis this offseason?
Oh, okay. Well, we need to address this offensive line issue.
For sure.
We need to figure out some continuity with the secondary. Looks fine. Okay, the secondary doesn't look bad to me. Okay, but there's this defensive line. I don't know where I feel how I feel like they got the pressure, but there's definitely you can get some juice, a little bit more on that end. What I do think is the biggest issue. I told you, these offensive weapons. People think I look crazy, but no, it's the truth. You need to go throw a bag at some offensive playmakers.
Yeah.
You need to get somebody to spruce this offensive up. Try to find a wide receiver 2 or 3, like a sneaky Christian Kirk or like something like that can bring a speedster in like a questionable role. But I'm saying a true wide receiver 1 is the first option in this team. That's what I think personally. Okay, A.J. Brown is somebody that needs to be talked about. George Pickens is somebody needs to be talked about. There's other players that are waiting. T. Higgins, I don't know if he signed or if he didn't. I don't know what's his ideal. Last time I saw his contract, I'm just saying, try to vie away people from teams that can give you something worth noting to talk about. Okay, this quarterback needs somebody. He literally asked tonight that he needed somebody. You could see it on there. Okay, the fact is, yes, he was rattled. I'm not going to blame it on him. It's sad I keep saying it, but it was the worst performance I saw him all season. The worst performance.
It probably was.
The biggest stage, and it sucks. It sucks that it happens. But in order to get back to the Super Bowl, in order to do what you need to do, to find a way, it takes the whole entire team. Now they need to pick up their slack, and he needs to understand that because a lot of people were going to watch this film tonight and going into the offseason, and they're going to be like, oh, well, this is Drake May's weakness. We can find a way to rattle him, again, just with these box of defenses, how we're schemating this defensive line. He's got to be able to overcome this. If you want to be able to be that guy that wins the championships, that guy that becomes the MVP, you have to be able to bounce back. And that's what's going to be talked about in this league. And tonight, it didn't happen. And he knows that. There were some very, very questionable throws, and there were some big throws that he could have had that were just this close to be breaking it. But again, I've told you this, and how I know is that what's this close doesn't happen in football. What almost doesn't happen in football. What ifs don't happen in football. And that's pretty much it.
I mean, think about how this close New England was to getting some turnovers on Sam Darnold, and it didn't happen. Guess who got the turnovers on Drake May? Seattle did, right? That sometimes those little margin plays are the difference in these games. I really like A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown is, he's familiar with Vrabel. He was drafted under Vrabel in Tennessee, and he'd be very familiar. And I think you could put him on the outside, and Diggs will be under contract next year. And assuming there's no fallout from kind of some of the legal stuff he's dealing with right now, you can kick him inside and have him be a slot receiver, which I think he's been very good at his entire career, is running those inside short to intermediate routes out of the slot. The offensive line is the thing that I'm torn on. I don't really have an opinion on, because as much as I want to say they got to improve it, I don't know if this offensive line, the best thing for its improvement would be continuity or bringing in new faces. Because at the end of the day, the left tackle and the left guard are both rookies, right? So as much as you want to say this offensive line gets better, you always want to count on your draft picks making that jump from year 1 to year 2, right? So it would be very much a statement if New England said we're moving on from Will Campbell or we're kicking him inside already to already move off him after 1 year, right? After a rookie year in which he was hurt a lot of the year. He came back down the stretch. So that I don't really have an opinion on. I'd be fascinated to see what New England does in terms of that. At minimum, I think they probably could use an improvement at right tackle over Morgan Moses, who also had a pretty bad game tonight. But me and you will be here all off season. We'll talk about free agency, team needs, and all that stuff. The story of tonight, as much as we could talk about New England and their shortcomings, the story of tonight was one of the most dominant defenses we've seen in a long, long time, and an offense that, frankly, tonight just didn't make any negative plays. They just didn't mess up. And we talked about it with C.J. Stroud, and we talked about it with other quarterbacks this postseason. When you have an elite defense, you just can't mess up. Punts are your friend. If you can end every drive with a kick, whether it's a field goal, a punt, or an extra point, it's a good thing. And that's what Seattle did tonight. They ended up getting the win. They are the champions of the NFL. And they're the team that everyone's going to be looking at this offseason. I think it could very well change the way some front offices this offseason. A lot of defensive-minded head coaches got hired. Miami moved off an offensive guru in McDaniel to Jeff Hafley, a defensive guy. The Baltimore Ravens moved off of Harbaugh. They bring in Jesse Minter, right? A lot of these defensive coordinators are getting jobs as head coaches now, and I think the Seattle team could really change the landscape of the NFL for the years to come. Obviously, people know my stance. I can't stand Seattle, but I have all the utmost respect in the world for the way they did this operation. I just think, early in the year, they weren't on many people's radars as a Super Bowl team. I had them going to the playoffs as a 10-7 team before the year as like a 7 seed. And my guys at the Here We Go podcast, they were like, you were taking Seattle to the playoffs? Do they even have a good unit? You're trusting Sam Darnold? And I was like, this defense is good. I could have never imagined this, and I really think this is going to change the landscape of the NFL for a bit now.
No, and what I want to end off of this, Joe, and I'm going to give you the last word. But first of this, I want to say this. From a USC fan, finally seeing some success from a guy, and I told you, I know it wasn't the classiest performance, but this man deserved every single bit. And you know what? You should share I know you don't want this, because even when I saw the Eagles win last year, I was like, yeah, they're better than Chiefs, but give a little pat, because that's a Shanahan guy for you, okay? Sam Darnold did spend a year. He was comfortable in that stadium. And at the end of the day, with this guy from the NFC West, from a SoCal kid, showed to everybody that if you bet on yourself, and even in our business now, if we bet on ourselves and you see the work behind it, you're able to reap these benefits. And when he trusted himself and his product from the first year on this team, he rose to the occasion. And he didn't find ghosts tonight. What he found was glory, and he made just the amount of right plays, just enough to win. And now he will be a Super Bowl champion. And the one thing to take away from him, even if he doesn't get back to another Super Bowl the rest of his career or whatever, he was a starting quarterback in a Super Bowl in Northern California in general.
Yeah.
And he won. He got a big W.
Yeah, absolutely. To think that draft class that Sam Darnold was in had Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield, who are 3 quarterbacks people love and are beloved, especially Allen and Lamar having both been MVPs, and to think that this guy is not only the first guy of that class to win a Super Bowl, the first one to go to a Super Bowl, is pretty incredible. I could go down the line of all the things I can't stand about the Seattle Seahawks. Sam Darnold is not one of those. I think Sam Darnold, you can just appreciate the journey from that start in the Jets. That's a hard place to start your career, is going to New York with that big of a market, with that dysfunctional of a team. He goes to Carolina, another dysfunctional team, just kind of lay lows for a year in San Francisco, learns under Purdy, learns under Shanahan, and then resurrects his career. And as much as I want to, praise Sam Darnold, I want to praise the Seahawks front office equally for taking a chance on him, because the way that season ended for him last year, the game against Detroit and the game against the Rams in the playoffs, I don't think any NFL fan that needed a quarterback for their team wanted to touch Sam Darnold after those 2 games last year. They're like, did you see the turnovers? Did you see the sacks? You want this guy? And Seattle said, not only do we want this guy, but we're going to move off of Geno Smith, who I know it's easy to say Geno Smith sucks after the way he looked with the Raiders this year. But Geno Smith was a guy who was having success in Seattle, went to playoffs with the Seahawks. and they said, we're going to take a risk on Sam Darnold. We're going to go trade Geno, get a third-round pick for Geno Smith, by the way. Can we talk about how good of a front office move that is?
Yeah.
Right now, is any NFL team doing a 6-7 pick swap for Geno Smith? I don't think so. So the fact that they got a third, yeah, I realized what I did halfway through. I'm glad I didn't chuckle, actually. But no, it was truly remarkable that this Seattle front office took a gamble on Sam Darnold like they did. And as much as I want to be a Seahawks hater and I hate the corny nickname, the dark side, for their defense and all this other stuff, you have to appreciate just how how good this operation was from top to bottom. I just think this was a Super Bowl high level operation, and if any team deserves to hoist the Lombardi, I do think it is this team based on what they did this year. Just an unbelievable roster, unbelievable coaching staff, and a front office that has just set them up for as much success as possible. So that's it. And now 371 days until Super Bowl 61. Only 300 miles south down here in Southern California in LA. It'll be interesting to see this offseason. We've already had a bunch of coaching carousel moves and whatnot, so it'll be interesting to see, who really coming into the year we think of as the top dogs. Is Seattle still going to be the team that most people think are atop the mountain? Is there any teams like Kansas City, like Buffalo, like any of these other teams we've seen the past few years? Are they going to make improvements? That is to be seen, but me and you will be here all offseason to break it down.
Yeah, exactly. Last couple of notes. Yeah, hey, maybe we'll be the ones hopefully getting a taste of some media access next Super Bowl. That'd be a dream, man. And I think one thing to understand is the defense. People need to know, NFL fans, because we got 5 people watching this live on my end. Understand this. People talked about schematics, spend the money, the big money on the offense, reshaping it. No, you should be spending the money on the defense, because what you saw tonight, even if your offense can just make that amount of plays, it honestly could end in a victory and a franchise that needs it. And there's a lot of teams right now that are in big droughts. I'm wearing one on my shirt. And my PSA to them is you got to spend some money where it needs to count, because or else you're going to keep seeing yourself in the same position. And Seattle, 11 years later, did a big difference, and they reap the benefits. That's what I want to say, Joe. I appreciate you. Tell people where they can follow you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Offsetting Penalties Podcast. Follow the pod on YouTube, Spotify. We're posting clips on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts every day. The content, is up and down. Me and you, both college students here. We're both grinding. It's not always consistent, but yeah, Offsetting Penalties Podcast. I appreciate everyone being here. As always, I think to end things off, this is the NFL. You always get back to where you were eventually, and I think we've seen a phase of offense, and now teams are realizing the way is you don't run with the trend, you find a way to stop it. You find a way to buck the trend, and the way to buck the trend is these dominant defenses, is these defensive head coaches. A lot of defense coordinators were hired as head coaches this offseason, and I think that's going to be the trend we see in the NFL for the years to come. No football for a very, very long time. It makes me absolutely I'm so sad. This is the best time of year, and the NFL has the longest offseason, but the offseason never rests, never sleeps in the NFL between free agency, which is in a month. You've got combine, you've got draft, the schedule release. The Niners and Rams are going and playing in freaking Australia. The Cowboys are playing in Rio de Janeiro. We're not even done with this season, and we're already getting announcements for next season. The NFL never rests, and it's unbelievable. And me and you will be here all offseason to fill the people in, maybe not as consistently with no games, but we'll be here, especially with free agency right around the corner. Yeah. And some teams like Seattle, like New England, very much will be competitors in the market. So Offsetting Penalties Podcast, as always, follow Gametime Grech. His link is in the description of this podcast. Please go check him out on Instagram. Follow Titan Sports Network. He's been doing a lot of great work on the mic at TSN, and maybe some new projects on the way. Wink, wink. Nothing more needs to be said there. But as I always say, if you're here to the end of the show, I appreciate you. You're an absolute psycho. More UFC and NFL content on the way. But for now, the Seahawks are the champs, and I appreciate everyone being here.
Appreciate you guys. You guys have a great one. Have a good night, and enjoy.